How do you steal a nation? This man didn't rob a bank. He robbed a country, and for years, no one could stop him. There was no brute force. There was no overt declaration of war against the people he was meant to serve. The theft was quiet. It was methodical. It was executed not with a weapon, but with a pen, a phone call, a series of perfectly legal-looking documents. This is the story of how a nation's treasury was drained, not in a single dramatic act, but through 1,000 small, almost invisible cuts, leaving a hollow shell where a government once stood. The plan unfolded slowly, over years, in the open yet hidden from view. It was a masterpiece of deception, built on the simple foundation of human ambition and the slow erosion of public trust. He did not need a mask or a getaway car. His tools were bureaucracy, legislation, and the willing complicity of those who stood to gain. He understood that the most effective way to take everything was not to break the laws, but to rewrite them. He knew that if the theft was wrapped in the flag and presented as progress, the public saw new projects announced and grand speeches delivered, never suspecting the rot spreading beneath the surface. This was a heist that targeted the very soul of a country. It went beyond mere financial crime. It was a calculated seizure of power, designed to turn the instruments of the state against its own people. The courts that were meant to provide justice became tools of persecution. The agencies tasked with oversight became engines of plunder. The media that should have exposed the truth was co-opted to broadcast a narrative of success and stability. Each institution was slowly and systematically hollowed out, its original purpose forgotten and replaced with a singular goal: to serve the interests of one man and his inner circle. The Great Deception relied on complexity. Financial schemes were designed to be so convoluted that they would confound investigators and bore the public. Shell companies were layered upon shell companies registered in jurisdictions where secrecy was paramount. The scale of the operation was staggering, but its execution was subtle. It was a slow-motion robbery happening right before everyone's eyes, yet so skillfully camouflaged that by the time the alarm was raised, the vault was already empty. The silence of the watchdogs was the sound of the nation being bled dry. He did not appear overnight. His ascent was a slow, deliberate climb from obscurity. He began his career as a minor functionary, a man easily overlooked in the bustling corridors of power. He was a fixer. He was a networker. He was someone who understood that real influence was not wielded in the spotlight, but in the quiet rooms where deals were made. He learned the art of the small favor. He learned the strategic alliance. He learned the whispered promise. He built a reputation as a man who could get things done, who could navigate the complex web of bureaucracy to achieve a desired outcome. His early patrons saw him as useful, a loyal subordinate who knew his place. His loyalty, however, was only to his own ambition. He used each position as a stepping stone to the next, gathering information, forging connections, identifying the weaknesses in the system. He cultivated a circle of followers, individuals bound to him not by ideology, but by shared self-interest. He offered them positions. He offered them access. In return, they gave him their unwavering allegiance. This network became his personal power base, a shadow government operating within the official one. They were his eyes and ears in every ministry and department, ensuring that his will was done. As his influence grew, he began to place his people in key roles. He didn't need to control every single post, only the ones that mattered. Head of the National Treasury, Chief of Public Works, the Attorney General, judges in the highest courts. He selected individuals who were deeply compromised. He selected individuals who were ideologically aligned. He selected individuals who were too timid to challenge his authority. These appointments were not seen as a coup at the time. They were presented as routine administrative changes, necessary for efficiency and good governance. Each appointment was another lock removed from the nation's safe. With his network in place, he began to subtly alter the rules of the game. Oversight committees were stripped of their power. Auditing requirements were weakened. The capture of the state was not a violent takeover. It was a quiet infection. Once his loyalists were embedded in critical institutions, the process of subversion began in earnest. The Department of Public Works and Highways, an agency meant to build the nation's future, became a primary vehicle for plunder. Budgets were systematically inflated. Contracts for roads, bridges, flood control systems were awarded to companies secretly owned by him or his associates. The public saw progress in the form of groundbreaking ceremonies and glossy brochures, but the reality was a betrayal of their trust. The very infrastructure meant to protect and serve them was being used to impoverish them. The justice system, the ultimate guardian of the rule of law, was bent to his will. The money did not vanish into thin air. Its disappearance was the result of a sophisticated, well-oiled machine. The process involved three primary mechanisms: ghost projects, inflated contracts, a global network of shell companies, and secretive banks. The cash didn't move in armored trucks. It moved as electronic whispers, flowing through the arteries of the international financial system. A silent hemorrhage, draining the lifeblood of the economy one transaction at a time. The brilliance was its appearance of normality. Entities on paper, often registered in offshore havens, Cayman Islands, Panama, British Virgin Islands. No employees, no offices, no real business operations. They acted as intermediaries to receive government payments and funnel funds to secret accounts. They had legitimate-sounding names, hiding fraud from low-level auditors. Contracts often passed through 3 or 4 such companies. Second tool, fake invoices and fraudulent billing. Government agencies paid for services never rendered or goods never delivered. For example, invoices for consulting services, project management fees for a road that was never built. The payment would be approved by a compromised official, and the funds would be wired offshore. To outsiders, it looked like a standard transaction. The paperwork was all in order. The signatures were valid. But the whole exchange was a fiction to legitimize the theft of public funds. Final tool, complicity of international banks and legal firms. Money cleansed through shell firms needed a safe haven, moved into accounts at major institutions and hubs like London, Switzerland, New York. Elite law firms created complex trusts and foundations to obscure ownership. Money bought luxury real estate yachts, private jets, fine art mixed with legitimate investments, nearly indistinguishable from clean money. The global commerce system had been weaponized to hide the proceeds of a national heist. Ghost projects were the lifeblood of the kleptocracy. On paper, they were ambitious infrastructure plans designed to improve lives. A 2025 investigation into flood control in the Philippines revealed the scale. Billions were allocated for seawalls, dikes. The Department of Public Works and Highways produced detailed plans and budgets. But when disaster struck, many of these projects were phantoms. The money had been paid out, but the structures weren't built. Funds meant to protect families were stolen, leaving them exposed. The scheme was simple and brutally effective. A contract was awarded. Funds were released from the Treasury. Reports with falsified progress photos were submitted. Projects were marked completed on paper. On the ground, empty land or a shoddy foundation. One former lawmaker says $1.7 billion was inserted into the 2025 budget. Insiders claimed suitcases of cash, sometimes $17 million, were delivered to the leader's residence. Contract inflation was also common. A bridge that should cost $50 million was budgeted at $150 million. The contract went to a crony company which built it for the true cost. The extra $100 million was siphoned off among the leader, officials, contractor. Harder to detect because something existed: the bridge. The public could see it and drive on it. Unaware, they overpaid. Excess funds sat in private accounts abroad. This wasn't unique. It mirrored cases like the MDB scandal in Malaysia. A state development fund became an elite piggy bank. Over 4.5 billion was diverted through complex transactions. The money financed Hollywood films, bought luxury properties, funded lavish parties. Citizens were told it was for national development. In reality, it was a slush fund masking grand larceny. Section 6. The Moment of Reckoning. For a long time, the nation operated on a fumes of false prosperity. The government continued to function, salaries were paid, and the official economic reports remained positive. The theft was so vast, yet so diffuse, that its immediate effects were not felt by the general population. But a country's treasury is not a bottomless pit. A system built on extracting wealth without creating it is fundamentally unsustainable. The turning point arrived not with a sudden crash, but with a dawning, horrifying realization. The money was gone. The state was bankrupt. The first signs were subtle. Government suppliers complained of delayed payments. Public sector employees found their paychecks arriving late. Small, essential infrastructure projects were abruptly canceled due to, budgetary shortfalls. Then, the crisis hit the mainstream. The finance minister was forced to announce an emergency austerity program. Subsidies for fuel were slashed. Food were slashed. Funding for schools was frozen. Funding for hospitals was frozen. The government admitted it could no longer meet its debt obligations. The carefully constructed illusion of stability shattered in an instant. It was the failure of the flood control projects that finally galvanized the public. As torrential rains hit in late 2025, areas that were supposed to be protected by billions of dollars in new infrastructure were submerged. Homes were destroyed. Lives were lost. The public saw a direct, tragic link between the corruption they had heard rumors about and the suffering they were now enduring. The ghost projects were no longer an abstract accounting issue. They were a matter of life and death. The anger that had been simmering beneath the surface erupted into a nationwide firestorm of outrage. This moment of clarity was devastating. People looked at the gleaming new skyscrapers in the capital and the luxury cars on the streets and understood that this wealth was not theirs. It was stolen from them. It was the money that should have built their schools, staffed their hospitals, and protected their homes from floods. Panic began to set in as the currency plummeted and banks imposed limits on withdrawals. The nation woke up to find that its future had been mortgaged and sold by the very people entrusted to protect it. The party was over, and the bill had finally come due. The public's anger could no longer be contained. What began as scattered protests coalesced into a massive, unstoppable movement. In a scene that mirrored historic people power revolutions, hundreds of thousands of citizens poured into the streets of the capital. In Manila, an estimated 650,000 people gathered at the Quirino Grandstand in November 2025, a rally organized by diverse groups united by a single demand: transparency, accountability, the resignation of the man they held responsible. They carried signs not with political slogans, but with simple, powerful questions.
Where is our money?
The sheer scale of the protests paralyzed the city and sent a clear message to the regime. Its time was up. The leader and his inner circle were caught off guard. They had underestimated the depth of the people's fury. Their first response was denial and deflection. They used state media to label the protesters as traitors and foreign agents. They tried to sow division and fear. But the lies no longer worked. The evidence of theft was too overwhelming, and the personal suffering of the people was too real. The security forces, seeing the tide turn and facing their own families in the crowds, began to waver in their loyalty. The pillars of the regime started to crumble. The political collapse was swift. Key allies, sensing the end was near, began to abandon the sinking ship. Ministers resigned. Lawmakers from the ruling party switched their allegiance to the opposition. The leader found himself increasingly isolated, surrounded only by the most die-hard loyalists who had too much to lose. The state apparatus that he had so carefully constructed to protect himself was now disintegrating around him. The courts he had stacked began to entertain impeachment motions, and the military command made it clear they would not fire on their own people. Imprisonment, exile, a desperate, violent last stand. Like Ferdinand Marcos before him, or Mobutu Sese Seko of Zaire, the primary goal became escape. Under the cover of darkness, With the assistance of the last few loyalists, he fled the country. He vanished, leaving behind a nation in economic ruin, its institutions shattered, and its people grappling with a profound sense of betrayal. The silent heist had ended in a spectacular and humiliating fall. International law enforcement agencies began the painstaking process of tracing the money, like the U.S. Department of Justice. Following the trail left by the 1MDB scandal, they knew to look for luxury real estate in New York, luxury real estate in London, secret bank accounts in Switzerland, shell companies registered in Panama. The hunt was on, but the quarry was elusive. Investigators quickly discovered that recovering the money was a monumental challenge. The assets were not held in the man's own name. They were hidden behind layers of trusts, foundations, corporate vehicles, all legally constructed by expensive law firms. Each attempt to seize an asset was met with a barrage of legal challenges. Lawyers for the anonymous owners argued the seizures were illegal, dragging the process through courts in multiple countries for years. The kleptocrat's greatest defense was the very legal and financial system he had exploited to hide the money. Despite the difficulties, there were small victories. A luxury penthouse here, a frozen bank account there. Authorities in one country might seize a yacht, while another might repatriate a few $1,000,000 from a cooperative bank. But these successes represented only a tiny fraction of the total amount stolen, which estimates placed in the billions of dollars. For the people of the ravaged nation, these announcements were bittersweet. They offered a glimmer of hope for justice, but also highlighted the immense scale of what had been lost and how little of it might ever be returned. The man himself remained a fugitive. Rumors swirled about his whereabouts. Some said he was living under a new identity in a country with no extradition treaty. Others claimed he was being sheltered by powerful figures who had benefited from his schemes. He became a ghost, much like the projects he had used to steal the nation's wealth. He existed only in court filings and news reports, a symbol of impunity. The people were left with an agonizing question. Could a man steal billions of dollars, ruin a country, and simply get away with it, living out his days in quiet luxury on their stolen future? In the end, we are left with hard questions and uncertain answers. Can a nation truly recover from such a profound betrayal? The economic damage is immense. It will take decades to rebuild the treasury, restore the nation's credit repair, the crumbling infrastructure. The human cost is even greater. A generation has lost faith in public institutions. The cynicism that follows such a grand-scale theft can poison a society for years, making reform and reconstruction incredibly difficult. Rebuilding trust is a far harder task than rebuilding a bridge. What of the money? The history of asset recovery is not encouraging. Of the estimated $5 billion to $10 billion stolen by Ferdinand Marcos, only a portion has ever been returned to the Philippines. Of the $5 billion plundered by Mobutu Sese Seko, almost nothing was recovered. Global financial crime has become a $1 trillion-a-year industry, with money siphoned from developing countries into the world's wealthiest economies. The legal and banking systems that facilitate this flow are powerful and resistant to change. Recovering the stolen assets is a slow, expensive, and often fruitless legal battle fought across a dozen jurisdictions. And what of justice? Sometimes it arrives. In Malaysia, former Prime Minister Najib Razak was sentenced to a lengthy prison term in December 2025 for his role in the 1MDB scandal. But such victories are rare. More often, kleptocrats die in comfortable exile protected by their stolen wealth. The legal cases against them outlive them, fizzling out in endless appeals. The web of complicity is so vast, involving officials, bankers, lawyers, in multiple countries, that holding every guilty party accountable is a near impossible task. For many victims, justice remains an abstract and distant dream. This story is a stark reminder of Lord Acton's timeless warning. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. When checks and balances are eroded, when oversight is dismantled, and when one person is placed above the law, theft on a national scale becomes not just possible, but inevitable. The only true defense is a vigilant citizenry, a free press, and strong, independent institutions capable of holding power to account. The tale of the man who stole a nation is not just history, it is a recurring threat. The final, chilling question is not whether it will happen again, but where it is happening right now, quietly, in plain sight.